I always thought I knew my old man like the back of my hand, but that changed when I stumbled upon that dusty photo tucked away in the attic. A questionable-looking group of people standing around a bonfire, their faces contorted in a mix of violent delight. My heart raced as I recognized my father among them, younger but undoubtedly him. I called out to him, the photo trembling in my hands like a confession waiting to be heard. His footsteps echoed on the creaky stairs, and he appeared at the attic entrance, his expression a mask of surprise that quickly shifted to something more sinister. He tried to play it cool, but his eyes gave him away, panic swimming in those depths. I demanded answers, my voice a mix of anger and fear, and he sighed, defeated. He beckoned me to sit and began to spin a tale that was hard to believe, about secret societies and a past he tried to escape. He wove a web of deceit, casting doubt over everything I thought I knew. The more he talked, the more I felt the walls of my reality crumbling, replaced by a new, horrifying truth. As the night wore on, the wind outside howled, as if joining in my disbelief. The photo lay between us like a curse, an unspoken verdict that my father wasn't who he'd always claimed to be. And in that moment, in that dimly lit attic, the lines between the ordinary and the sinister blurred, leaving me haunted by the question, what else has he been hiding? Sitting there in that dimly lit attic, I felt like my world was spiraling into a nightmarish vortex. My father's confession hung heavily in the air, each word he spoke chipping away at the reality I had clung to for so long. He leaned forward, his eyes locked onto mine, a mix of guilt and desperation in his gaze. I used to be part of a group, he began, his voice cracking with emotion. A group of ghost hunters. My mind stumbled over the words, ghost hunters. I had seen those cheesy reality shows on TV, but I never imagined my father, the man who fixed things around the house, who always had a terrible joke ready, as one of them. He continued, his words a blend of nostalgia and dread. We started off seeking out the supernatural, hoping to debunk myths and provide comfort to those haunted by their fears. But over time, things changed. We began to encounter entities that defied explanation, malevolent forces that seemed drawn to us. He described nights spent in abandoned buildings, listening to the whispers of the dead and facing shadows that moved of their own accord. With each revelation, the pit in my stomach deepened. The world he painted was one of uncertainty and danger, a world he had shielded me from. We were foolish, he admitted, his voice growing quieter as he remembered. We thought we could control these forces, harness their power for good, but we were wrong. The darkness seeped into us, twisted our motivations. The group grew obsessed, delving into rituals and practices that were far beyond our understanding. I shivered, my mind conjuring images of my father and his companions, dabbling in things beyond human comprehension. He spoke of nights spent in grim rituals, of books filled with forbidden knowledge, and of the gradual descent into a darkness that consumed them all. Eventually, it became clear that the things we were dealing with were not just ghosts, he murmured, his voice barely audible. They were something older, something more primal. We were in over our heads, and we couldn't escape the consequences. My heart pounded, and I struggled to process what I was hearing. It was like a veil had been lifted, revealing a reality that was both terrifying and surreal. My father, a part of a group that had unleashed something beyond their control, something that still lurked in the shadows. They're after us, he whispered, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and sorrow. All those who were part of that group, they're drawn to us, seeking revenge or maybe something even darker, and now they're coming for our family. A chill swept through the attic, and I felt a cold sweat break out on my skin. The air seemed charged with an otherworldly energy, and it was as if the room itself was listening, waiting. My father's hand reached out, his fingers trembling as they closed around mine. I'm sorry, he said, his voice breaking. I never wanted you to be a part of this, but we're running out of time. We need to find a way to protect ourselves, to break this curse before it's too late. As his words hung in the air, a sense of impending doom settled over us. The photo that had started it all lay between us, a stark reminder that the past was catching up with us, bringing with it a darkness that threatened to consume everything we held dear. And in that attic, in the presence of unspeakable secrets, I realized that the horror was far from over. It was just beginning. Days then weeks went by, and the weight of my father's revelations pressed down on me like a suffocating fog. He taught me rituals meant to protect us, symbols to ward off the malevolent entities that hunted our family. As we delved deeper into this hidden world, I could sense the desperation in his eyes, the urgency that kept him awake at night. Yet no matter how much we prepared, the feeling of impending doom only grew stronger. One evening, as the sun set and shadows stretched across our living room, my father called me over. His face was a mixture of determination and sorrow. "Listen," he said, his voice low and urgent. "I need to show you something." He led me to a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards, and there it was, a worn journal, filled with cryptic symbols and handwritten entries. It was his journal from the days of his ghost hunting group, a chronicle of their descent into darkness. Flipping through its pages, I discovered tales of encounters with entities that defied logic, descriptions of rituals that sent chills down my spine, and sketches of symbols that were supposed to hold power over the supernatural. But as I reached the final entries, my heart sank. They spoke of desperation, of plans gone awry, and the increasing realization that the entities were closing in on them. My father's voice trembled as he pointed to one particular entry. "We thought we could stop them," he said, his eyes haunted. "We thought we could banish them once and for all, but it only made things worse." The entry detailed a ritual that was meant to bind the malevolent forces, but instead, it seemed to have angered them, drawing them closer to their targets. As the days wore on, the tension in our home grew unbearable. Whispers echoed in empty rooms, shadows seemed to move of their own accord, and a sense of dread hung in the air. My father rarely slept, his eyes bloodshot, his demeanor that of a man on the edge. And then, one fateful night, as a storm raged outside, he turned to me, his gaze filled with a mixture of resignation and sorrow. "Listen to me carefully," he said, his voice quivering. "I don't know how much longer we have, but you need to be prepared. I can't protect you from what's coming, but I can at least give you a fighting chance." He handed me a pendant, a simple piece of metal etched with the same symbols that filled his journal. "Wear this at all times. It's our last line of defense." Fear clawed at my heart as I held the pendant in my hand. The weight of the situation was almost too much to bear. "Dad, is there no other way?" I pleaded, my voice cracking. He looked away, his expression pained. "I'm afraid not. We've gone too far and the consequences are catching up with us." His eyes met mine, and for a moment I saw a flash of something I couldn't quite comprehend. Just then, a chilling wind swept through the room, extinguishing the candles and plunging us into darkness. My father's grip tightened on my shoulder, his fingers digging into my flesh. "Remember, no matter what happens, stay strong. Protect yourself." As the darkness closed in, I felt a rush of cold air, a whisper of a presence that shouldn't have been there. And then, in the faint glow of a dying ember, I saw it. A glimpse of something malevolent, something that had breached the boundaries of our reality. In that moment, I realized the truth my father had been hiding, the final revelation that shattered my world once and for all. The horror that had haunted us was much closer than I could have ever imagined. And as I turned to look at my father, his eyes now ablaze with an otherworldly light, a question burned in my mind. Could I trust the man who had brought this darkness into our lives? Was he now something far more sinister?